Thank you. So the next section, again, what does it all mean in terms of finances? Remember, and again, this is work in progress. So as we've worked through this to kind of get our information out, we noticed some issues that we want to make sure that we address. So as you remember, we are operating 101 schools, and this is how it's broken out between elementary, middle, and high. Based on what we're talking about today, we saw 8 elementary schools so for possible closure. Actually, we saw 2 middle schools, so this should actually be a 2. And then 5 high schools. We talked about going from 7 to 2, so 5 high schools. So that would be basically 15 schools for possible closure, which would then have our remaining schools be 55 for elementary, more like 12 for middle school, the 8 for high, again, alternative schools, and this would be more like 86. And so with that, as we've said, we operate too many schools, so most of our schools don't have enough resources to address the needs of our students. And so being stretched too thin, by reducing the number of schools, we're looking to release those resources for the remaining schools that would continue to operate. So what does it mean in terms of releasing of resources? Well, we looked at our unrestricted resources primarily, and what we've done for elementary schools is we've taken, for those 8 schools, their total unrestricted school resources, their budget, and we subtract from that the teacher costs. And the reason we do that is because the assumption is the kids will still be here, so they'll still need teachers to teach them. So we can get into that conversation a little later. So what's left is the rest of the costs that would be from that budget would be basically unrestricted resources available to be able to be reinvested in our remaining schools. And so when we looked at the teacher costs, and you can see the footnote there, we basically took their unrestricted full-time equivalents, so what's budgeted for their teachers, times the average teacher total cost, and that we've used 77,500 as a number. And so, when we look at their full unrestricted budget, that would include things like their custodial costs, utility costs, administrative costs, clerical costs, supply costs, and any other costs really associated with a school that's not related to a teacher. So the whole budget minus the teacher would be what would free up if those schools would be closed for investment in our remaining schools. So that's what we did for elementary. After this is presented, I did the same thing for the middle schools, and I can give you that number once we get to that slide. But for the high schools, for the Fremont campus, currently that school is budgeted as one single site for this year. Although it's 3 schools, we've actually budgeted the resources if they're one single site, and so those resources have already been invested. For the Casamont Yes campus, there was an additional investment made this year of about $226,000, and so that could be released for next year to spend on the support of a quality program. So that's kind of that's the methodology and the assumption from the unrestricted perspective. And so what does it yield? So for elementary schools, a little under $3.4 million. Again, Fremont campus already budgeted currently this year as one campus, so no yield. The Casamont Fremont campus, about $226,000 for a total of 3.6. And when we look at the 2 middle schools, that would yield another about $1.1 million. So we're talking about $4.7 million in total if you include the 2 middle schools. And just as a note, and we say here, it's possible that 20% of our students from closed schools, and this is based on national examples, may choose options other than our schools. And so if that happens, we would lose certain revenues generated from those students. But we anticipate that would be more than offset by the reduction in the number of teachers required, because you lose kids, you would lose the necessity for the teachers. And so that would also offset the loss in revenue generated by those students. Also, as you close schools and students do disperse to other schools, it's not necessary that you would need to actually add another teacher for one or two more kids at particular classes or schools. So, and note number two, and this is important, we will, let me repeat, we will invest in our receiving schools to ensure that as many of those students as possible are supported as they transition to the other school options, and we can hold on to as many students as possible. So, I mean, that's key for this process, and I think the timing for all these decisions, it needs to be very timely so we can get about the work to support this process and support the families as we transition into what we'll look like for next year. And the third note, these numbers are from the unrestricted side. Remember, most of these schools do receive restricted resources like Title I dollars and so forth. Those dollars too would free up to go where the kids go. And at the bottom here it says for the elementary schools is about $1.9 million of those dollars that are restricted dollars. For the two middle schools, it's about $1.4 million as well. So you have all those resources that would be released to be invested into the other remaining schools of our district.